Almost everyone knows the story. A Mexican general, exiled and defeated, arrives in New York with a strange lump of tree resin in his luggage. He hopes to sell it as a rubber substitute and fund his return to power. The scheme fails, but the man he hired to work with, that resin, turns it into something else entirely. Chewing gum. It is a great story. It has been repeated in textbooks, museum placards, and 1,000 trivia nights. It is also, in its cleanest form, not quite true. The real history is older, stranger, and far less tidy than the legend suggests. To find where chewing gum actually begins, we have to go back thousands of years before that New York workshop. Two people chewing tree resin for reasons that had nothing to do with rubber, war, or business at all. Long before anyone called it gum, humans were already chewing things that were not food. Archaeologists have found chewed lumps of birch bark tar in northern Europe dating back roughly 9,000 years. Some of these ancient pieces still carry tooth marks, and a few researchers have even extracted human DNA well enough preserved to sequence a genome. The birch tar was likely chewed to soften it before using it as a glue or sealant for tools and pottery, but the chewing itself may have served other purposes too. Birch tar has mild antiseptic properties. Some researchers believe it was chewed to soothe toothaches, freshen breath, or simply for something to do with the mouth and hands during long tasks. This is the first thread we will keep pulling on through this story. Long before gum was ever sold in a store, it was tied to the human mouth as a source of small comfort, and to the boundary between medicine and habit. Move forward a few thousand years and cross into the Mediterranean world, and the pattern continues. The ancient Greeks chewed a substance called mastica, a resin tapped from the mastic tree, which grows almost exclusively on the island of Chios. The Greek word for this chewing, mastikin, is very likely the root of the modern English word masticate, meaning to chew. Mastic was used both as a casual chew and as a treatment for digestive complaints and bad breath. It was valuable enough that Chios built a substantial part of its economy around it for centuries. At the same time, ancient writers occasionally treated public chewing as slightly indecorous, something more associated with common daily habit than refined behavior. Here is that same tension appearing again. A humble, everyday chewing habit, useful and widespread among ordinary people, while more formal or elite commentary treats it as a minor breach of polish. We will see this exact pattern resurface again and again as this story moves forward in time. On the other side of the world, entirely separate from the Mediterranean, indigenous peoples of North America had their own chewing traditions. Various Native American groups chewed the resin of spruce trees. Early European settlers in New England picked up the habit from them. By the early 1800s, chunks of spruce gum were being sold commercially in the United States, making it one of the first mass-marketed chewing gums in American history. A man named John B. Curtis is often credited with producing and selling the state of Maine pure spruce gum, starting in 1848. This predates the more famous chicle-based gum by decades. It is a detail many popular retellings skip entirely, because the more dramatic story comes later. But the spruce gum era matters, because it shows that the demand for something pleasant to chew already existed in America before the more famous origin story even begins. Around the same period, chewers also experimented with paraffin wax, a petroleum byproduct, as a cheaper base than spruce resin. Paraffin gum became a real commercial rival to spruce gum through the mid-1800s. Neither of these early American gums had much flavor or lasting chew compared to what would come next. That next development is where the Santa Ana legend actually starts to connect with real historical figures. Even if the details have been simplified and dramatized over time, Antonio López de Santa Anna, the former president and military leader of Mexico, was indeed living in exile on Staten Island, New York. In the 1860s, he did bring chicle with him, a natural gum harvested from the sapodilla tree native to Central America and southern Mexico. Chicle had long been chewed by the Maya and Aztec peoples, who called it something close to Chicle, and it was already deeply embedded in Mesoamerican daily life for well over 1,000 years before Santa Anna ever saw New York. Santa Anna reportedly hoped an American inventor could turn chicle into a cheap substitute for rubber, which was in high demand at the time for tires and other goods. He connected with a photographer and inventor named Thomas Adams. Adams spent roughly a year trying to vulcanize the chicle into rubber. Every attempt failed. the material would not hold up as a rubber substitute. According to the popular version of the story, Adams then saw a girl in a drugstore buy a piece of plain paraffin gum, and the idea struck him to try chicle as a chewing product instead. This part of the story is difficult to verify with primary sources and is best treated as company lore rather than confirmed fact. What is verifiable is that by 1871, Adams had patented a machine for manufacturing chewing gum, and by the mid-1970s, he was selling flavored chicle gum commercially, including a licorice-flavored version called Blackjack. So the legend is not a total fabrication. Santa Anna was real, the exile was real, the failed rubber experiment was real, and Adams did pivot to chewing gum. But the specific dramatic beats often told, like a precise eureka moment in a drugstore, rest on shakier ground than the confident tone of most retellings would suggest. With Adams's success, the American chewing gum industry began to take real shape, and it did so quickly. Other entrepreneurs entered the market within just a few years. William White developed a chicle gum flavored with sassafras and licorice in the late 1870s. A dentist named William Semple had actually filed a patent related to chewing gum even earlier. In 1869, though, he never commercialized it. By the 1880s, flavored chewing gum was a genuine consumer product across the United States, sold in general stores and later through vending machines. One of the biggest shifts came when a soap salesman named William Wrigley Jr. started including free sticks of gum as a promotional gift with his soap orders in 1891. The gum, it turned out, was more popular than the soap. Wrigley pivoted his entire business toward gum within a few years, launching Juicy Fruit in 1893 and Wrigley's Spearmint shortly after. Both are still sold today, making them among the longest continuously produced branded products in American history. This is a good point to note the recurring tension in this story once again, because it appears here in a new form. Chewing gum in this period was wildly popular with ordinary consumers, especially working-class Americans, children, and later soldiers. At the same time, etiquette guides, teachers, and social commentators of the late 19th and early 20th centuries frequently condemned public gum chewing as vulgar, unrefined, or simply rude. Some American schools banned gum chewing in classrooms as early as the 1890s, a practice that continues in many schools today. Newspapers ran editorials mocking the habit as class. The product that ordinary people loved kept being treated by authorities and tastemakers as something slightly embarrassing. That gap between mass popularity and official disapproval runs through almost this entire history, from ancient mastic chewers to Victorian schoolrooms. As demand for chicle grew through the early 20th century, the source of that raw material became a serious problem, and this is where the story takes its darker turn. Chicle could not be grown on plantations the way many other crops could. It had to be tapped from wild sapodilla trees deep in the rainforests of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, as well as parts of Guatemala and Belize. This work fell to laborers known as Chicleros. Chicleros worked in brutal conditions, hacking zigzag cuts into tree bark and collecting the sap by hand, often deep in remote forest camps for months at a time. They faced disease, venomous snakes, and exploitative labor arrangements, frequently tied to debt owed to the same companies or middlemen who employed them. Wages were often paid in credit, redeemable only at company stores, a system that kept many Chicleros in a cycle of debt. American and British gum companies profited enormously from this labor, while the people doing the actual harvesting saw comparatively little of that wealth. The chicle boom also drove serious deforestation and depletion of wild sapodilla trees across the region, since overharvesting could kill or badly damage the trees that produced it. By the mid-20th century, the natural supply of chicle was struggling to keep pace with global demand. The Second World War changed the gum industry again, in ways that reached far beyond factories and forests. Chewing gum was included in American soldiers' field ration kits, partly to help with dry mouth, boost alertness, and provide small morale-boosting comfort during combat and downtime. General Dwight Eisenhower reportedly requested large shipments of gum for troops. As American soldiers moved through Europe, Asia, and the Pacific, gum went with them, and in many cases, it was one of the first pieces of American consumer culture that local civilians, especially children, ever encountered. This gave chewing gum an outsized symbolic role, tying it to American abundance and goodwill in the post-war period, sometimes called gum diplomacy. It also permanently boosted global demand. This wartime demand collided directly with the supply problem building in the chicle forests. Natural chicle simply could not scale to meet a rapidly growing worldwide market. Chemists had already been experimenting with synthetic gum bases made from various rubber-like polymers and waxes. Since the early 20th century, by the 1940s and accelerating through the 1950s, most major American gum manufacturers shifted away from natural chicle toward these cheaper, more consistent synthetic bases. This shift devastated the Chiclero economy across Central America. Entire communities that had depended on chicle harvesting for generations lost their primary source of income within a relatively short span of years. Today, the overwhelming majority of chewing gum sold worldwide uses synthetic gum base rather than natural chicle, though a small niche market for natural chicle-based gum has persisted and even grown somewhat in recent decades among consumers seeking biodegradable or traditionally made products. The post-war decades also saw chewing gum become a genuine cultural fixture rather than just a product. Bazooka Bubblegum launched its comic strips in the late 1940s, becoming a fixture of American childhood for generations. Bubblegum itself, distinct from regular chewing gum because of its stretchier, more elastic formulation, was developed in 1928 by a Fleer chewing gum company employee named Walter Demmer, who was actually an accountant experimenting in his spare time, not a trained chemist. The first successful bubblegum batch happened to be pink, simply because that was the only food coloring he had on hand at the time. That is why bubblegum, to this day, is still overwhelmingly associated with the colored pink, even though there is no functional reason it needs to be that color at all. Through the second half of the 20th century, gum also became entangled with health questions, another echo of that old recurring tension between everyday pleasure and official concern. Early chewing gums were sweetened heavily with sugar, and dentists increasingly raised concerns about its role in tooth decay. This led to the development of sugar-free gums, using sweeteners like sorbitol and later xylitol, starting in the 1960s and expanding through the following decades. Interestingly, some sugar-free gums containing xylitol have since been shown in dental research to actually help reduce cavity-causing bacteria and stimulate saliva production, flipping gum from a dental villain into something dentists themselves sometimes recommend, at least in its sugar-free form. Gum has also occasionally run into outright bans and legal restrictions. Singapore famously banned the import and sale of chewing gum in 1992, largely due to problems with discarded gum-damaging public infrastructure like elevator doors and train sensors. That ban was slightly loosened in 2004 to allow gum for documented medical or dental purposes, but general commercial sale remains tightly restricted there to this day. Once again, a product loved by ordinary consumers ran directly into official disapproval. Only this time, it became actual law rather than just an etiquette complaint. By the 21st century, chewing gum had grown into a genuinely massive global industry. Industry estimates placed the global chewing gum market at approximately $20 billion in annual value in recent years, spanning traditional chewing gum, bubble gum, and functional gums marketed for breath freshening, teeth whitening, caffeine delivery, or nicotine replacement. Major companies like Wrigley, now owned by Mars, and Perfetti Van Mel continue to dominate global sales, alongside a growing wave of smaller companies marketing natural, plastic-free, or chicle-based alternatives. That last trend is a direct, if small, echo of the very oldest chapter of this story, a return to the same tree resin that Maya chewers were using more than 1,000 years before. Thomas Adams ever met Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, which brings this story back to something almost absurdly ordinary. The next time you unwrap a stick of gum from your bag, your car's cup holder, or the checkout aisle at a grocery store, you are holding a direct descendant of birch tar chewed by hunter-gatherers 9,000 years ago, of mastic resin traded across the ancient Mediterranean, and of chicle tapped by hand from rainforest trees by workers whose names were rarely recorded anywhere. The plastic-feeling base in most modern gum is synthetic now, a product of 20th century chemistry rather than a rainforest tree. But the basic human impulse behind it, the simple desire to have something pleasant to chew, has not changed in thousands of years. It just changed hands, changed continents, and changed chemistry. again and again, while staying remarkably true to what it always was. If you found this history as surprising as we did putting it together, subscribe to Savor the Past for more hidden stories behind the everyday objects in your kitchen and your pantry. Let us know in the comments what part of this story surprised you the most, or tell us which everyday food or substance you want us to dig into next.